We're back for a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. I'm your host, Andrew Raffel. And today, wanted to introduce listeners, viewers, to Jodi Hulme. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
And we're into 2025, so hope the year is off to a good start for you.
Little chilly, but other than that, yes, good.
Where are you located?
I'm in Maryland, so it was 6 degrees this morning when I woke up, which is chillier than we're used to. So
it was like 31 here in Scottsdale, which is cold for us. But my daughter goes to school in New Orleans, and they had a snow day yesterday and today, which is
wow,
very
that's
unique.
That's very unique.
So, Jodi, the Your Wealth and Beyond podcast, we're here to help entrepreneurs, business owners, build wealth, find purpose, but really help all of us become better CEOs, better founders, better entrepreneurs. And I know you've spent 20 plus years trying, I guess there's no such thing as perfecting the method, but entrepreneurs face a lot of battles day by day. First and foremost, before we get into your story, what is some of the biggest challenges that you've seen over your career that we as entrepreneurs face? And what's your purpose every day to help us?
So I am actually a third generation entrepreneur. And so I've been watching entrepreneurs since literally my entire life. Like my dinner table was entrepreneurs. And so that might be why I give you the answer I give you, is that from a very early age, I watched the back scenes of being an entrepreneur, like not just what it's like during the day, not just what it's like when you're out talking to clients or investors or whatever, but when you come home and you're exhausted or unsure or just beaten down or whatever. And it feels like it's not enough to say like the inside game or the mental game or the emotional game. Like that just doesn't cut it. Like it is a gauntlet sometimes. And not only does the uncertainty go up and up and up, the more you're doing like something that isn't a already pre-beaten path for you, but usually also the fewer people you can or want to talk to about things. And so this creates this tiny little world where you don't have a place to go work through problems. And that is everything in my business, is to make it not be lonely at the top, to not have verbal processors, not have a place to verbally process through things, because there's a lot of neuroscience behind why you need that. And for it to just not feel so yucky and isolating and alone, because it's not good for business either.
Yeah, and it's that constant treadmill that we're on. And, now into a new year, it's like we look back, we may have had our best year ever, but now it's on to the newest thing, the shiniest thing. And we as business owners, entrepreneurs, I think a lot of us are, ADHD, we're in a million different directions. We don't have sometimes the systems and processes, and we'll talk to a lot on leadership teams. And I know that you take a special affinity to how leadership teams can help a company grow. So this third generation entrepreneur, so it's been in your blood. What do you remember from those young days when you were, watching parents and grandparents both struggle and also celebrate their businesses?
So two things. One, the importance of doing both of those things. Like it's okay to struggle and to talk about it, and you have to have a place to process it. And it's not only okay, but it's super important to notice and celebrate the wins. And that's not just from so it's more fun. Like there's really solid neuroscience behind how your brain uses recognized wins as building blocks of like, it's like that game Warmer, Colder that we played as a kid. If you're blindfolded and someone's like warmer, warmer, colder, colder, recognizing the wins and taking the pause to celebrate them I can't tell you how important it is. I always do this reflection exercise in December with my clients where I have them look back at the last year and reflect and pick out wins. And they'll often, actually, I'll back up 1 second. As entrepreneurs, we are hardwired to see what more there is to do. Like, oh, this could be better. I can make it better. I could do more. I could do that. And I wouldn't take that out of someone if I could, but it comes with a dark side of we are less prone to notice how far we've come and where we have actually made huge strides. And you have to recognize that not just for your own benefit and for the companies, but it is so important for your team and the people on your team for you to take that leadership role in pointing out, like, look how far we've come, not just checking off KPIs, but like, here's a place where we were a bit of a mess, and now we've like pulled this together. We're really getting better at this thing that was hard for us. And so there's that side of it. But the other thing that I specifically remember as a child was my mom grappling with things, and she's very much a verbal processor. So she would just like talk while we were doing stuff. And I don't know if it's like my version of I see dead people or something, but when she would be talking, I could just tell the difference between like if down deep she thought it was a really bad idea and it was just like she just wasn't quite listening to her intuition, or if down deep she knew it was a really good idea, but it was just scary. Like that just felt differently in my body. But what I also really learned to listen for is when it wasn't about the issue at all. She was just run down or exhausted and she needed to sleep or rest or just like take a break or go for a walk or drive around town or something. That awareness. And I would say like, I because it would, there's a bit of a spin to that one. And no matter what solution you come up with, it's like, yeah, but there's this and yeah, but it's like a very like slippery conversation when somebody is actually just too tired to even decide between like a hamburger and a cheeseburger. And I would say, I think you need to rest. And she would listen to me weirdly. I was little. And then the next day, the issue it would be either gone or diminished or just much more clear. And so that is a thing that's hard to hear for yourself. Like it's a little bit hard to know. It's usually a blind spot. You don't realize how tired you are or how depleted you are sometimes. So that's one of the things that's important to have someone who can be like, I think you need a nap or I think you need to go to the gym. Like you need to recharge in some way. Your battery's flickering.
Yeah. And I think we've, over at least the last decade or so, we've gotten better as taking care of our health. It's been more in that mainstream versus it used to just be, let's just keep running into the wall. And I'm, going to have I'm going to work 24/7, 365. It's this like badge of honor. So we're think better at that.
We're getting a little bit better. I mean, we're definitely getting better at the talk of it. I think a lot of us are getting a lot better of encouraging other people to do it. I think many of us are not so great at doing it for ourselves sometimes. But that's okay. It's a small shift. But yeah, I used to joke that, that whole hustle culture thing is a little bit like back when we thought the world was flat. This joke has gotten less fun in recent years where some people actually argue, but, where the world is flat, we just don't want to pay attention to the science, like the neuroscience of what your brain needs to be at not just optimal capacity, but just like even high average capacity, what you're capable of is astounding. I mean, it is, there's no arguing about what your brain actually needs, and it needs sleep and it needs hydration and it needs downtime. Like you can't have, they call it an insight, but like ahas, creative ideas, those like spark of genius, there have to be alpha waves present in the brain. And that comes when there's not a bunch of other noise. And now we listen to podcasts in the car and we do this. Most people have their best ideas in the shower, but even that, a lot of us are now like, Alexa, play the news, and, or the shower. And so we have such a diminished space to recharge. And it's so important.
So when a client looks to find you as your services, and like who finds you? Is it somebody who's already they're knee deep in building their company and they've got now 10 employees, no leadership team, they've got success happening, but just this decision fatigue and so many things coming at them? When am I finding you? Or is it where I'm very mature, I'm 10-year-old company and I've got certain things in place? What am I looking for if I'm a listener and I'm on a different path than the next?
Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time with like people just trying to get something to take flight. And typically now, if I'm working with those like just starting out folks, it's not their first rodeo. They're a second or third or fourth time they've sold, they've moved on, they've come back around again. Most of my clients are a little established. The work that I am doing with them changes as they get bigger. So when they're smaller, like I have a roundtable for tech startups, for founders of SaaS companies. Those folks range everywhere from still developing their MVP to having a team of 15, 20, 30 people. They're all still navigating really uncharted territory. So they still have a lot of, shared stuff that they're dealing with, and they work with each other. But as I also work with people who run much, much, much larger companies. With those folks, I am doing very little business consulting, and it is more just the sort of personal strategy of being a leader, how you lead with your team, how you lead with your exec team is slightly separate from that, your whole team and your exec team. And also their own verbal processing about what's going on in their head or in their lives too. I do not differentiate between business and life. In fact, the check-in I use throughout everywhere is this like upside down triangle of business and life, and then them as a person distinct from business and distinct from your family. And I use that and I make the weird upside down triangle because if you are wobbly, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, also just like bored or just not as fired up and turned on about what you're up to anymore, anything that's going on there will show up in the business and in your life outside of business. And so I want there to be this distinct focus. And it's really interesting. When I first started doing that, I used it in my group at first, a great number of people couldn't answer for themselves distinctly from, they'd say, well, my family's great, so I'm great. I'm like, nope. Nope. There is a separate you are this separate entity, and you are at the core of all of these things, and you will be the mechanism by which these other things, how well they do. So when people find me, usually they are, first of all, great deal of my clients come from word of mouth and referrals. It's a very high trust. And because what I do doesn't have like a handy name to it, it's a little bit of a next step off of coaching and consulting. I structure it all as like on-call decision support. I really don't believe, a lot of times when people think they need a coach or they think they need a consultant, they really just need someone to help them hear and sort through and distill and discern what's going on in their own head so they can find clarity. But they know a great deal of the time, they know what they need to do. They just need to hear it back or get that kind of validation or invalidation, whichever way it goes, so that they can be more clear. And so that's not exactly a thing people Google. So a lot of times it comes through word of mouth or hearing me on shows and whatnot.
And this, the neuroscience that you mentioned a little bit in the past, how has that been the cornerstone to building your company and to being able to help your individual business owner clients?
Yeah. So I have always been a brain nerd. I did my 7th grade science fair project, whatever, on the brain. And I actually had this like cow brain. I don't know why I decided to do that. I do not remember that part, but I remember I had it in a jar. I got it from like a local butcher shop or something. I don't know. I can't believe I'm telling that story. But the brain has always fascinated me. And so I have, I just constantly read things on it, because to me, it's like unpacking, it's like the engineering of humanity. It's like, why do we do this? And how do you do that? And like what first sparked my interest was when I read a thing about, I don't even know where I would have read it because I was like 9, but about them doing surgery on someone. And they're like, oh, if you push on this part of their brain or stimulate it, they'll cry. Or if you do this, they'll do that. And I was like, that's wild that tears are just like a response. And so those connections of what's behind what we do, sometimes we really misinterpret that. So it's this kind of reverse engineering, like how do we optimize that thing in our head so that we can get what we want in the world? And honestly, it's more not get what we don't want. I think we a lot of times kind of self-sabotage or just use weird structures. We make sense. We'll have a feeling, and then we'll use logic to make sense of it. And a lot of times that logic is not so wise. And so picking that apart to make sure that people are going to get what they really want out of the action and the energetic and mental resources that they have to give to their business. I want to make sure if they're going to devote that they're actually headed towards the end goal that they actually want, and they're not accidentally driving in the wrong direction.
So it's a little bit of a quasi therapy that you're helping your clients go through.
Yes, I actually have 2 clients who jokingly call me their business therapist, but because it is, I mean, and it's, I am not a therapist. I do not have my license in therapy, but
full disclosure, she is not a therapist.
Full disclosure, yes, I am not a therapist. As they say on the internet, I'm not your therapist, but But the thing is like business is, I have a fair number of clients who would never go to therapy, first of all, but business is such an emotional ride. And it really does, I think parenting and running a business are possibly the most intense personal development processes that you can ever go through. And I would put marriage like as a second right behind those two, at least in my ways. Like parenting and running a business will bump you up against every nook and cranny of stuff that's not sorted out, of every sort of like weird little shadow issue you have. It's gonna come up. And just like in life, you can choose to step over them, but if you have a place to process through them, then everything wins. Your relationships, the business. And what really drew me to this work, as opposed to going into therapy, I contemplated being a counselor or a therapist. That wouldn't have been super interesting to me. I also, it's sort of both sides, being a business consultant, being a therapist. It feels a little one note to me. Whereas this like Venn diagram of business and the emotional side of it is because you have to diagnose you have to get down to what's like the core issue here. And I'll have people call me about sort of do like business couples therapy sometimes when two really important people have just become toxic with each other, but the company really doesn't want to lose either one of them. I've committed and done some work with those people. And sometimes it really is an interpersonal issue. There's been a beef, or like somebody said something, whatever, their personalities just don't match well. But there's also a number of times where they are being pitted against each other because the business has outgrown some operational structure, and that is creating this like bone on bone without cartilage between their relationships. And so you ask a few questions, you're like, wait a minute, this isn't actually about them. This is actually an operational structural issue that needs to be tweaked so that these departments aren't, like pitted against each other. And so that like, again, it all comes back to like making sure you're working on the right problem. That is my favorite work in the world, of like, are we even working on the right problem here?
Yeah, because so many times I think we get caught in the weeds on things that we sometimes think are so important. We're so dialed into these details, and then it leads to indecisiveness. And I know you mentioned a lot in your work is this indecision fatigue that we face. And I've tried to tell my wife over the years that, hey, I can't you decide on dinner because I've made 7,000 decisions today and I just can't do it. And it's hard to convey that to somebody that's not living in the world that we live in, that has so many decisions coming at us at all points throughout the day.
Nothing but decisions. Like almost everything in leading is just a waterfall of decisions and decisions and decisions upon decisions. And so it is absolutely exhausting. And that's for real reason. Like, making decisions uses a high tax part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex that is responsible for decision making. It uses glucose, which is the brain fuel, faster than any other part of the brain. That reptilian part can run on fumes like forever. It will just keep going no matter what. It needs very little fuel. But that front part tires out. That front part is also in charge of like willpower, and not willpower, but impulse control. And we've all witnessed what happened. This is why you wake up in the morning and you're like, I'm going to drink all the water and eat the right foods and do all the right things. And you do for a while throughout the day. And then by like 7 o'clock at night, you're eating a sleeve of Girl Scout cookies. Like, that is because that part of your brain that has the brakes is like, you used me up already. Like, I am done. And which gets into the neuroscience of like how to maximize that, is like spacing out your day. Like, there's a lot of like little glitchy bits in there that you can stretch that out to make it work better. But you said something a minute ago about oh shoot, never mind. Okay, I'll come up with it in a minute. There's something I wanted to wrap back to, but go ahead.
Indecision fatigue, not wanting to make the decision. But so what are some of the things that you do then to help for each of us have maybe our own time of when we know we're going to be most creative or we're going to get our most work done, like stripping that back and trying for the listeners and the viewers, if they don't have a coach or they don't have somebody that's helping to guide them through, or therapists, et cetera, what do we do? How do we try to figure out like even structuring our day.
Yeah.
Where
So
where do we how do we work to see where's our best work?
yeah. So first of all, knowing this part, I can't exactly give you a tip for, but like knowing when your best time of day is. And I think most of us have a good sense of that. And being shameless about structuring your day in a way that doesn't conflict with that ever possible. I used to do, there were a few years where I kind of led with this service around time strategy, not time management. It was not, but just like, let's be incredibly strategic about the resource you have that is time. And I would have people design out this ideal week. It is not intended to then be a template that you just like try to shove things into. No one's world works that way. However, what it does do is let you even have like a lot about working with entrepreneurs is just making the invisible visible so that they can then work with it as much as possible. So if you make that visible for yourself of, okay, like with me, I know I do my best. If I need to write something or articulate a thought leadership piece or be really creative or dig into the analytics of a client's thing, it needs to happen in the morning. And probably like right after I finish my coffee, it's like my first burst out of the gate is when I am firing top. It would take a lot for me to schedule any kind of thinking, truly thinking client work at 4 p.m. because honestly, by the end of the call, I'll probably be like, I'm going to give you your money back on that one. Like it is my low point and it's not my best time in the world. And so knowing that, and then really putting strong boundaries and structuring your day around your high points and your low points, including, even if you don't know you need this, taking little breaks. Again, the neuroscience is astounding around what even every hour or two, even just having a 5 minute break, go walk around the house once or walk around the building once and come back. It does wonders for how much glucose, like it extends the half-life of that glucose way more. Our brain is not designed to do marathons. It's designed to do a series of sprints. And that's up to and including not being afraid to take a 15 or 20 minute nap in the middle of the day. If you're someone who can do that, flies against the face of everyone's, go crazy. But again, the neuroscience doesn't lie around this. But so structuring your day in a way that works for you. A lot of people do time blocking and have tried it and it doesn't work for all the reasons. I like to put time things around two kinds of things. One is things that could get cannibalized by other people. For instance, I worked with a real estate agent one time who, you have to show houses when people can go to see houses. Like she can't just say, I only show houses at 2 on Tuesdays. That would never work. But what we could do was say like, okay, in my week, these are the 3 places that are best for me to show houses. And then here are 2 like sort of second tier. If I need to, I can do it here and here. And that was all we set for that. Like, here are the places I would like to put them. If somebody needs it another time, she puts it in another time, but she starts off with where it goes best in her week so that she has deeper focus time for other things. So it's a great deal of coming to the kinds of conclusions you need as an entrepreneur is looking for the nuance in something. Because every time I say, well, just these places where you do the thing, they're like, but what about that person? I'm like, you can always have exceptions, but you're just trying to not start with their exceptions. And then you end up with this Swiss cheese of like a calendar you can't do anything with because you have these weird blocks and nothing. So the flip side to that I do with people's time is things that need to be sacrosanct. And there's 2 layers to that as well. So like, here's a thing that I'm doing that can't be moved. It's like a class I'm taking or something. Or like the roundtable that I run for entrepreneurs. I can't just wiggle that by an hour or 2. Like it is on there and it goes there and it stays there. Then there's another level of something that needs to happen every day. I'll stick with the realtor. So she was doing a program where there's like, whatever it is, like you have to, if you write 10 cards a day to past clients or something that she needs to do every single day, it needs to happen every day, but it doesn't matter when in the day. So the rule with that one is it's on there, but you can move it if it's not. And it's just with entrepreneurs, what I have found is the kind of structure that helps them like rocket fuel is like dotted line structure. It's like just enough structure to create freedom and space, but no more. Like you do not want to overstructure things, especially for the ADD folks of us, which it's a nightmare for that. So you're just looking for like just the Goldilocks amount of structure that removes the sort of like chaos or frenzied kind of stuff. And then you stop, like nothing more. Because there's a real tendency when people start to write policy manuals or have SOPs, all of a sudden you're like doing things down to this like nitty gritty. You're like, nope, y'all are never going to follow along that level of detail. It's not happening. So just look for like one thing that'll create some structure and see if that's enough, and then it's like adding salt to soup or something, you know, like little dip,
Just a dash.
little dash, taste it first, don't put more.
What are you using tech stack wise to control your day? Is there, I know everybody's a little bit different, but I always love to hear what somebody in your position is doing.
I know. I do have I am on a like a I guess I would call it almost like I'm trying to be like tech sober a little bit. Not actually tech sober, not using it, but not when it comes to trying new things, because I am one of those I love to be an early adopter. I love to like test out things, and I'll be like, "Ooh, a new software I can like blah blah blah." So I'm sticking with what I've been using and it's working. The main thing that keeps me sane is my calendar. And I use Google platform for my stuff, but my calendar is the crux of everything. And that's the thing that keeps me from being a complete ADHD off course thing. So I never like if something happens, I'm like, oh, I'll put that on there later. No, that is one place I hold myself to like the highest standard of it happens, I put it on the calendar. And then I have been using Asana with my assistant who lives in another country. And that is I'm really, really happy. It's the first time I've probably tried 42 different task things and CRM things. And I may have tried them all, and I don't know if it's magic about Asana. I don't think it's magic. I think that she and I have just together figured out the way that it actually works. But I do have some, for me, visual discernment is really important when, like back in the days when I still used Outlook, like you could put tasks into Outlook, but once they're one big long list and you can't like, I can't see them anymore. I have to be able to make like things. I'm just very visually oriented. So it has to have that. So those are my big ones. Actually, the best thing that has happened to me, and it has kept me from then needing to test all these other softwares, is there's a company called Practice that created a software for service providers like me, like consultants, coaches, anyone who has like appointments and is running a practice of clients. They are, it is still developing. So every week or two, there's more stuff rolled out, but it is hands down the most well thought out. They've just got, and over the years, I think I've tested I tested HoneyBook. I tested like this, that, and it's really made for people who do this kind of business. And it's been really great.
Yeah, to me, we've actually incorporated Asana a couple of years ago, and that's been the one that has worked.
Maybe it is Asana.
Maybe it's the golden the magic bullet, but also I for me, I've also sometimes just go old school and here's my 3 rocks I need for the day, and I write it down. That has been so good versus those to-do lists. I've tried all of them too, and it's just too much. And then you feel like you're not winning, because we always want to win. And then all of a sudden it's info overload, and it's crazy.
You just brought up a really important point that I won't skip on this. There's 3 things when I'm trying to help someone else get clear on systems and whatnot to watch for. And you can watch for this for yourself as well. So one is being clear of like what for you needs to be more analog. So for me, and this is just my little personal recipe, I need to use the electronic things to capture all the things because they pop into my head when I'm at a stoplight or I'm at the doctor's office or wherever. So it needs to be like in my phone, or I can be like, oh, that's that thing I got to remember to do. So I use the electronic to capture it. I cannot look at that and be like, okay, here's what's important to me today. Because all of a sudden I'm seeing all the things. And this is a trap people fall into. They find something that helps them collect all the stuff. And then they're looking at too much stuff. And so for me, it's like a 2-stage system. I collect it all there, but then I look at it and I say like, okay, what am I getting done this week? and I write it either on my little whiteboard thingies or in a notebook or on stickies, whatever it is. There has to be some sort of like tactile transfer. And then once I've written it with my hand somewhere, then it's prioritized in my brain. Again, this is just like my own little version. Pay attention to your own little things. And it may not be that the tool is failing. You might just need like another little piece of something, or just another like a different tool or a different way of doing it, but really creating it around like what works for you. But this is the other thing. Sometimes you don't need a how, you need a who. And this is the thing that I like for years, I kept trying to find software that would keep all the little gaps where something might get lost for me, and like it would magically like catch them and put them in the right place. And that's a really high ask versus I just need a person that, and then the processes of how I work with that person, because sometimes trying to get technology to do everything for you, you just need a person for certain things. And between those three things, I'm like, what can be automated and it needs to be electronic? What do I just have to do my own way? And then what can somebody else be in charge of helping me do?
And that's where we have the assistants or the stakeholders that help. Leadership team. So I know you helped grow a company for years on an architecture firm,
Yep.
and you were instrumental in as this operations side and sitting on the leadership team. So for business owners, entrepreneurs, maybe they have a leadership team, maybe they don't. But let's walk through some of the real value that can come from a leadership team, and then some of the mistakes that you see entrepreneurs make who maybe have one but aren't taking to the fullest extent of how beneficial it can be to grow the company and to delegate and to have others that are there to help drive the company.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because, I started at that architecture firm right out of school. I thought I was going to be there for 6 months and then go back to grad school and become a counselor or something psychology-ish. I don't know. And I ended up being there 16 years. So, because I loved it. And I got to use both sides of my brain, left and right brain. But I tell you that part of the story because that was the only real place I'd ever worked. I'd had jobs all through high school, but I wasn't like in a company like that. And so I didn't know some of the things that we did were somewhat unique. Like that isn't how all companies do everything. And one of the reasons I think that company was so successful and has remained so successful is how powerfully they used their leadership team. It really was the furnace core of the company. We met every single week on Monday for as long as it took. Like sometimes it was 2-3 hours, sometimes it was only an hour. They did annual retreats where for like a week where they would dig into everything. They really gave it a lot of time and attention. And then it wasn't until I started working with all these other companies, like sometimes I'd be like, wait, you don't ever meet as a leadership team? I'm like, what, how do you how do you do things? Like, how does this work? So just even having a leadership team that meets is the first step. And that sounds so basic, but some people don't do that. The real thing that makes a leadership team like 1 + 1 = 7 is because the sort of next level is I'll meet people who have a leadership team and they do meet. So that's a good start, but they're meeting as like the individual heads of whatever they're on the leadership team for. And they're like they're like reporting out or like, or they're just sort of catching up on what the other people are doing. And it's stopping there versus using that team as like a mastermind for the company and really processing. And that's the part I see missing a shocking number of times is, if Bob is talking about this thing, like there's a whole team of people who can help solve that problem. And it sounds so obvious, but it is a place I don't necessarily see people cross-pollinating and thinking together. And it reminds me a little bit of this like couples therapy modality that I read about, where if you have, if you're coaching person A or you're coaching person B, you're still kind of keeping them on opposite sides of the table. Whereas like there's this third entity, which is the relationship. And if you coach the relationship, then these people will get what they need. And it's that concept of like, there's everyone at the table representing whatever they're representing. And then there's the company, and having those intentional conversations of like, so not just talking about what is service need or programs need or whatever the divisions are, but like, what does the company need? And having that highest level conversation, because the place I see companies drag in their development is when the CEO imagines that it's their job to figure all that stuff out and then tell their team. Because not only is that missing out on the resources of all the other brains that are also seeing a bunch of things you don't see, so they also have added information you don't have, but it's also cheating them out of developing into bigger, more strategic thinkers and knitting them together as a team. But it also means that you then have the burden of describing, you've gone through this huge, long process of thinking about all these different things. And then you're just going to come in. It's like walking in and telling the punchline of a joke and being shocked that people aren't laughing. It's like they didn't see the whole process you just went through. So they can't appreciate that. And what's interesting about this is that same thing happens then when leadership teams grapple with something and then try to go back and tell the whole team, tell the broader company about it. They're often frustrated that everyone isn't all immediately like, oh, that's a great idea. They're like, that's not the best idea. And what you want to say is like, you should have seen our other 4 choices. They were way worse than that one, but they didn't see that whole process. And so that just comes back to the more people are involved and they actually get to use their brains to help come to the solution, they're automatically bought in. So it's where I see people get a little off track on that is they'll come to their own conclusion and then they'll come to the team and try and like have a faux conversation, like where they're hoping they get to that same idea themselves and they try and control it. People sniff that out really quickly. So it's not that, but it's bringing it to the teams early and having those conversations together so that you're all figuring it out.
And should the CEO even be leading the leadership meeting?
That is a great question. I don't have a super strong feeling on that other than to say, that's a great question. I haven't really thought of, I love when people ask me questions I haven't thought about yet. I'm going to think about that more. And if I change my answer, I will let you know. But my answer right off the bat with this amount of thinking, I don't know that here's that meeting should be facilitated more than led. Like I don't really care who makes sure the conversation is going, because no one should be like presenting and then it's done. It should be, and there's a little bit of a distinction here. There's like the daily, the weekly business kind of stuff that is more like reporting out. But then when you're getting into like the depth of it, if you're going to have a deeper conversation, that conversation should be facilitated. And an internal person can facilitate, but it's a different hat. Like I am a completely different human when I'm facilitating a conversation than when I am participating. I'm actually kind of a nightmare when I'm participating because I interrupt everyone and every thought I have comes out like my ADHD side comes out hardcore. When you're facilitating, you're not steering the conversation. You're corralling it. You're pulling out all the voices. You're making sure it's almost like the meeting version of metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. This is like sort of not meeting about the meeting. The verbs don't work there, but you get it. Like facilitation is like watching from an out of body experience almost. And you can still participate too, whoever's facilitating, but I will take that one step further. Part of the reason I facilitate and why I think facilitation is so valuable is there absolutely should be spaces in these bigger conversations where it's not being led by the CEO, because for better or for worse, I call it like leadership eyebrow. If the leader makes a little bit of a face, everyone thinks they're against it. Or a lot of times, and I have CEOs complain about this sometimes because it can be frustrating. They're like, I ask a question in a meeting and people will be like, well, Kevin said we have to blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, I just said, have we thought about doing that? And they're like, well, he wants us to blah, blah, blah. Like your voice and your face and your body language come with a much bigger weight. And it's really hard to keep that out of the conversation when you are actually leading the conversation. So having an outside facilitator allows there to be space where you can be a participant but someone else is leading it. And it does take the gas off that a tiny bit. So
And
great
is that
question.
some of the things, is that what you do with some of your clients, that you'll actually sit on the leadership team to facilitate?
Oh, so I have done that. Yes. That is not a super common thing people have
Yeah.
me. Like I have actually become like an embedded leadership team member for a few years, especially leading up to a sale. Like when I've worked with some folks who are like, I've worked with a number of folks as they're leading up to trying to be acquired. So I've done that then. But what I was actually referring to is about half my practice is team and leadership facilitation. So I will come in for a half day or
Yeah.
a 2 day or a 2 hour or whatever and facilitate those
Yeah.
conversations.
And you mentioned too, these offsites or retreats that the leaders can do, or even just the whole team can do. For us here at my firm at Baintree Wealth Advisors, it's been instrumental in clearing our heads and being able to have some of the best thinking and strategizing, and you can't do that when you're in the office.
Yeah.
Also been fortunate to be part of EO Entrepreneurs Organization for 7 years, and we have
Wow.
our mini retreat coming up next week, and that's where we get together, and we're going to be going up to Sedona and just getting away for 2 days, having your business director, your the board of directors as these other entrepreneurs in different industries. I see over the years such the value of that, being able to come back and being fully recharged, and so I think that's a huge thing for business owners to be able to help
Yeah.
facilitate for their group to help get everybody on
Absolutely.
track.
Yeah, and the real like one of the hardest things I think if you organize something like that is and the leaders who get it, they get it. And if you've been to those kind of retreats, you get it. Is do not pack, because it's very easy to feel like, oh my gosh, we have everyone away from the office for 1, 2, 5 days, whatever it is, and so we have to get a lot done, which is true. But that can erroneously lead to the perception that you should pack every second from like breakfast through like 8 o'clock at night with stuff, and we're making decisions, we're having important conversations. You are missing such an opportunity if you cram the day, because the real value, not really, it's not the only value. There's plenty of stuff you need to like knock through and make decisions, but there's so much value in the percolation time. Again, this is neuroscience. Won't bore you with it, just trust me. Like the percolation time is when like the ahas click, and there's also the interconnectedness time. So like having the social aspect, having the do nothing, the walk away and go. I mean, especially in Sedona, I'm very envious. Going and walking and being outside in nature, that resets and recharges brain cells that then make that next hour session you do 10 times better. And it's so hard. I even have to resist the urge sometimes where I'm like, oh, should we be doing more? And you're like, no, this has
Yeah.
value. It really, really does.
You must have seen my agenda, because